I'd like to start this morning by just telling you a little bit about this past week for me. Not that it was a really strange week out of the ordinary, but some things of note happened anyway. And just so you know, I have another job Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. So I get up like everybody else and, get out there and go to work and then come home in the evening. And as you all know, this time of year, our weather, it's like, one day it's summer, the next day, night, it's like winter. Maybe Tuesday morning, I got in the car and I'm not even sure if it was 30 degrees outside. And I'm thinking, what in the world? I'm having a coat on, and I know by the afternoon when I come home, it's almost 80 degrees. We can complain about the weather all day long. And that's even before I got to work. And then, I get to work, and so I'm a numbers guy. And I'm learning a new job. I've been there almost 3 months now. They're teaching me all sorts of stuff. I'm doing bank reconciliations of volume of transactions I've never seen before. We have millions of dollars coming in, millions coming out, and you got to make sure that everything down to the penny's right. I was getting into that one day, and I found out there were a couple items that were missing. These things, they cleared the bank, but nobody recorded them in the system. So I had to go to my boss and have them, walk through this with me to figure out. So that was a little frustrating here or there. And then, on the way home, I had to get gas. You know what it's like getting gas. You take out a small loan for that. It's $4 plus a gallon. So, so after a long day, get home, have dinner, try to relax in front of the TV. I love baseball, so my team was on, and my team was not doing well at all this past week. So you see them lose 10 games in a row or whatever crazy number that was. And so we have a lot to complain about, don't we? We could go around and get all the complaints from everyone and see what everyone's dealing with. And if I were you, I might be thinking, you know what? I hear my own share of complaining from the people I'm around during the week, and now here I come to church on Sunday morning and I hear the first several minutes of the message being his complaints too. What gives? Well, it's an illustration for you again. We can complain about a lot of different things. There's actually a lot of, in recent years, a lot of research and study doing on complaining. And this morning, I'll use the words interchangeable, complaining, or what the Bible uses, grumbling. That's what we read about mostly in the Bible. People grumble. And so a lot of study on it, though. They say that the average person, which there are some more and some less, but the average person, when you account for the hours that you spend sleeping, will voice a complaint about once every half hour throughout your waking hours in a day. When you add that up over the day, we got a fair amount of complaints. And like I said, I know people, I'm sure they well exceed the average, and then some not so much. Not all complaining is bad. Some complaining is done in order to try to effect some kind of positive change. For instance, hundreds of years ago, people would have to dig holes for a variety of reasons. You want to build something, you have a foundation, you got to dig it. You got to build graves. You build a moat around the castle, you got to dig this stuff. So they did it by hand. They had a shovel and they did that. I'm sure that it got to the point where there was enough complaining, they thought this is backbreaking work, there's got to be a better way. Well, then, as technology advanced, somebody created the backhoe or something like that to do what it took all day for a lot of men to do. So I'm sure that was a situation where complaining resulted in some positive effect after that. But I'm sure we all know not all complaining is done for more, shall we say, positive or righteous means. When we don't have to go very far into the Bible to find people who complain. The book of Exodus seems like that's all they get done doing is complaining. And sadly, Moses is the guy who is on the receiving end of it. And they're who I'd like to look at this morning. Going to Exodus 16, the backstory to it is they had been in bondage and slavery in Egypt for hundreds of years. So this generation was born into slavery, Jewish people in Egypt, born in slavery. That's all that they knew. Well, God raised up Moses. He split the Red Sea. They passed through on dry ground. This is their first freedom they've ever had. And so we'll see how they reacted, though, when they got on the other side of the Red Sea after never seeing freedom before in their lives. So I want to read in Exodus 16, beginning in verse 1, going up to 17. It says, the whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. Then the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. On the 6th day they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days. So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, in the evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, and in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard you grumbling against him. Who are we that you should grumble against us? Moses also said, you will know that it was the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening and all the bread you want in the morning, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we? You are not grumbling against us, but against the Lord. Then Moses told Aaron, say to the entire Israelite community, come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling. While Aaron was speaking to the whole Israelite community, they looked toward the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in a cloud. The Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. That evening quail came and covered the camp, as in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, what is it? For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, it is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Each one is to gather as much as he needs. Take an omer of each for each person you have in your tent. The Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much, some little. May the Lord's blessing be added to the reading and hearing of God's holy and perfect word. So, we have a situation where the people are not happy, despite their recent history, despite growing up in bondage and slavery, and being a part of one of the greatest miracles that God ever performed, parting the Red Sea. And that's only part of the miracle. The miracle really was the dry ground. Because if it were just wet, those chariot wheels would get stuck in there, but that's another thing. So they passed the whole way through, got a brand new land, and they start grumbling. Hey, Moses, what's up? We don't have anything to eat here. And I know that's a legitimate concern, okay? But they start complaining about all these different things. The tail end of chapter 15, they were complaining about the water. Then Moses made the water sweet. They liked that. Oh, we don't have any meat to eat. So then they complained about that. Well, it's easy for us to point fingers at them, because if I were among them, I don't know if I would be any different, to be completely honest. I like to think I would, but maybe not. I think what we're supposed to see, though, when we read this is the faithlessness of these people. They had no faith in God whatsoever. And it's like they didn't understand the character of God. Now, I'm not saying that they should expect another miracle because he miraculously provided bread in the morning. So I'm not saying that we witnessed one miracle, so now we got to expect another. It doesn't work like that because miracles are miracles. They're few and far between typically. What I am saying is that if they thought logically in their minds, they should know that God is real. God had his hand on them. God got them out of slavery in a very miraculous way. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever that he would bring them through the Red Sea just to die of starvation on the other side. That doesn't make sense. Now, from our human perspective, I see where their problem was. They didn't know where they were getting food or water from. That's a legitimate concern. What they should have done is gone to Moses with an open heart and an open mind, said, Moses, can you explain this to us? Can you ask God what he plans to do? Because we're concerned here. We need to eat. We need something. That's not how it came off, though. Because Moses, later on, he wrote the book of Exodus. And when he writes it, he doesn't say they were genuinely concerned. No, he says they grumbled. That means they weren't really interested in having a positive result. They just wanted to say, we're upset. We want you to know about it. You got to do something to make us happy. That was the condition of their hearts. And that was when they went to Moses. They were grumbling so much. I feel bad for Moses. I mean, he's got to hear this from hundreds of thousands of people. And he knows the situation. He's going through it with them. So I feel really bad for Moses. They didn't know back then some of the things that we know now. There's actually been a lot of study on grumbling, complaining, whining, whatever word you want to use, and the effects on us in recent years. Stanford University did one such study. They said and concluded that constant grumbling and complaining literally will physically alter your brain and the shape of your brain. Not only that, and not for the better, of course, but not only that, not only the person who does the complaining, the person who's got to hear the complaining, the Moses in the situation, if you listen to someone constantly complaining for 30 minutes, they have concluded that that is enough to reduce the size of the hearer's brain that controls memory and problem solving. So when you're hearing complaint after complaint for a half an hour, put it in my own words, it's going to make you more forgetful and probably stupider too, because you can't problem solve. So it's not only harming yourself, it's harming everybody who's got to listen to you. But that's the kind of people that we have in Exodus 16 here. And it seems like that's all they get done doing. I mean, Exodus is a long book. They complain, God appeases them. They complain, God appeases. It's this constant cycle that they're dealing with there. And we can't always in our lives avoid complainers and grumblers. We might work with them. We might live with them in some circumstances too. But we can learn from Moses. Moses took the complaints to God. And what I find really interesting is that he didn't even have to really tell God. God, all that we read, the way Moses writes it, they complained to me, God talked to me. God didn't even wait for Moses to pass along the complaints of the people. We'll get more into that a little bit later. But the way that and this is how you know that they were really grumbling, not wanting a positive solution to the problem. And this is very common among this kind of situation. They said, these are the words that Moses says they said. In Egypt, we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. Hold on a minute here. First of all, Moses was with them in Egypt. He was in slavery as well. Does anybody with half a brain think that people who are slaves in Egypt were given all the meat they ever wanted? No, not at all. So what they are doing is they are twisting the facts. They're twisting history to fit their own agenda. People do that all the time. Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun. That's why we read this. We can see they did it then. They're still doing it now, you know. And so they were upset, and so they exaggerated the details. This is much worse now than what it really is. I'm not saying it was good. They should have been genuinely concerned to have food and water, but they made it seem so much worse. They wanted to grumble, they wanted to complain, and they took it to Moses. And that's where I said Moses, he was going to take it to God, but God apparently heard himself. And so God says, you know what? I'll give you bread in the morning. I'll give you some meat in the evening, quail. And the thing with quail is I often wondered, was this just a random bird that God picked? Were they like prolific in that region? There's a reason for it. And God does these kind of things to get our attention. In Egypt, we're talking, 2,500 years ago, quail was considered a delicacy. It was very expensive. They went crazy over it. It was for the elites. So you know what God's doing? God says, I know you need meat. You like Egypt so much, I'll give you the Egyptian delicacy until it's coming out of your noses. If you want to be Egyptian, I'll give you. And that's what he did. There was so much quail that it says later on that they were being flooded with it anyway. So it wasn't just some random bird God picked out, oh, here's a lot of quail, there you go. So that's a little bit behind that. And so when you're reading through Exodus 16, you get to the point, we're not really talking too much about Moses anymore. He started it, but then the perspective shifts to God now. And it happens so quickly and so subtly. And that's because all along, when the people were complaining to Moses and Aaron, God knew that the complaint was against him. It wasn't really against Moses and Aaron. They were just convenient individuals who were sort of in leadership. But God knew, it's not that they're unhappy with Moses and Aaron. Moses and Aaron, they're just being obedient. God says, I opened that Red Sea, they led you guys across. They're waiting for me to tell them what to do. So it's not fair that you go and complain to them. So God says, God says, I know that it is against me personally, and I'm going to do something about it now. I'm going to show you how I do care for you. I'm going to provide for you. You're going to have water, and you're going to have plenty of meat too. That's how God comes into the picture, that their complaints are really directed towards him, even though they went through Moses and Aaron. What we are supposed to see when we read through Exodus is how unfaithful and ungrateful these people were. Again, put yourself in their situation. If I were in slavery and if I were given my freedom, I like to think that I would be appreciative of every single thing I got. These people weren't, and that was a function of the condition of their hearts. They were expecting God's grace, and when we expect his grace, it's no longer grace, because the definition of grace is it's unmerited blessing. Now, going back again, or bringing it forward, I should say, to our modern day, with things that we have studied and have learned about this, there is negative impact of chronic grumbling on our physical bodies. Your mind is not separate from your body. What happens in your brain, it affects everything else. You know how you can make yourself sick, if you think about something it's the same thing here. There is a direct connection between this and physical sickness, and there is a scientific reason for it. A bit of it's over my head, but I'll explain as simply as I can. There's a chemical in everybody called cortisol. Cortisol helps you heal, among other things. And so it's, your brain sends it throughout your body, my leg hurts, or I got a cut here, so it sends cortisol there. Well, whenever a person chronically complains and grumbles, your brain then pulls the cortisol up to the head. We've got to fix something up here. But there's really not much to fix. So that then is not healing the rest of your body. Therefore, people who tend to, and also it redirects your blood and your oxygen and a lot more than cortisol too. People who are considered chronic complainers or grumblers tend to suffer higher risk of heart disease, high cholesterol, diabetes, obesity, and stroke. And I'm sure there's even more than that. Those are just the main ones that they mention. So it's something to be aware of. We, as Christians, we should take care of our bodies, and we can help our bodies out a little by the things that we think of and the things that we dwell on and so forth. But in church, we tend to be more focused on our spiritual well-being, and rightfully so. So it's not just our physical bodies. We can get spiritually sick whenever we grumble and complain, because that all comes from negative thoughts, negative feelings, negative emotions. If everything's great and positive, I have nothing to grumble about, right? So that sort of makes sense. There's a man named Nofel Stanton, and what he wrote about this idea of grumbling in some thoughts on Exodus 16. He said, grumbling is a sin just as serious as idol worship, sexual immorality, and having it your way over God's. Grumbling places a barrier between a person and God. It also drives a wedge between him and the other people against whom he grumbles. Did you ever think that just complaining or grumbling is actually sinful? That's why I entitled the message, A Subtle Sin. I think it's so subtle, a lot of us don't even realize that this is something God does not approve of, because it is a slander against him. It is our way of saying, God, you're not doing your job good enough. You don't care enough for us. You're not providing for us enough. My circumstances aren't good enough because you aren't doing what you should. And so we complain, we grumble. And so, furthermore, in James chapter 5, James tells us, do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. James says grumbling is going to bring judgment. So you be careful as far as that's concerned too. Now, Exodus, it's a great book. I mean, all the Bibles of the book I say that about every one. But as far as Exodus goes, there's a lot of negative people in there, because it's all these grumblers and complainers that Moses and Aaron are trying to lead through, the desert, and we know the 40 years of wandering and all that. But next week, we're going to look more at the positive end, how we can stop or change our focus. So next week might be a bit more positive in comparison. But still, I don't want it to be all negative, all bad, because you know what? We all complain. We all grumble from time to time. I consider myself a fairly positive person. Don't like being around negative people, but, this year already, I found myself grumbling and complaining, and then I got to stop myself. I'm thinking, you know what? I really am blessed in many other ways, and God's done an awful lot for me. Now, what I want to do at this time, you have the benefit here of having the screen up here. I have like a 2-minute video that I'd like to share with you, and we got plenty of time here. The quality isn't the greatest, but it's more to hear what's going on than anything. Back in 1996, Summer Olympics were held in Atlanta, Georgia. And that year, the United States had a pretty good women's gymnastics squad. I don't follow gymnastics at all, but as a teenager, I was a teenager back then, I heard about this. It was on the news after this happened for quite some time. So the Russians were the favorite to win the gold in women's gymnastics. So it was down between U.S. and Russia at the end. U.S. took a late lead, and there's literally a little girl named Carrie Strug. I don't know if the name rings a bell at all. So she was the last one to compete. She knew that she had to score out of 10 points at least a 9.7. And if she did that, the U.S. women would win their first ever gold medal in women's gymnastics in the Summer Olympics. So I want to show you the video here of what happened. She gets 2 runs at it. I'll tell you, on the first one, she stumbles at the end. And hopefully the volume is going to be enough here to hear what's going on. So only about 2 minutes here.
Of the individual all-around, and the Americans could lose the team gold to Russia.
Again, not the greatest quality.
9-3. We've had one more Russian go. So Carrie Strug, it is up to her. If she can score 9.493 to see her parents in the stands or better, then she will win the team gold for the USA. She's the last to go. She's the only one who can do it.
She will also perform the same vault we just saw. Mochianu sit down 2 in a row on.
Oh! 3 falls in a row for the Americans. She is lifting. Carrie is hurt.
Oh, this would be really bad news, John.
Carrie Strug is in trouble. She just stumbled there. Her first score, 9.162 to do. She will go and she is ready. Carrie Strug is hurt. She is hurt badly.
What time we saw her lifting after the first ball?
She has either twisted her ankle or something worse. She hurt herself on the first vault. Probably the last thing she should have done was vault again, but she did, and now she is in a lot of pain.
The amazing thing about Coach John, she raised her hands overhead. Her head, she finished the ball.
Standing on one leg. We have got to find out. 9-7-1-2, she has done it. Carrie Strug has won tonight. She was there for Bella, for her team, for her country, and for herself. Carrie Strug.
Now, it doesn't look all that bad to me, but after that stumble on the first jump, she said later that it felt like fire was shooting up her leg. The pain was so intense. And then she said as she was limping, she said a quick prayer to God. She said whether it was answered a prayer or adrenaline, the pain sort of subsided. That you could see her jumping up and down, and then she ran. The second jump looked as good as the first. And so imagine being her, and then you got one more shot at this, and you need a 9.7. She got a 9.712 is what he said, so they, of course, won. And so thinking of that, I can just imagine all the negative thoughts in her mind. I practiced so long, her entire life. She's 18 years old. She was 18 then, by the way. Thinking all the negative thoughts. She could have said, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I'm hurt, I'm in too much pain, I'm going to risk, serious injury. But she said she felt like she had a responsibility to her team, to her country, to her family, to everyone. And so she did it. She won the gold medal there. And I liked how the cameraman showed a picture of her manager carrying her up there. The medics wanted to directly take her to the hospital. She said no. She said, I have to receive this gold medal. And her teammates weren't going to receive theirs unless she was there with them. So she was able at least to stand on her 2 feet and not move to receive the medal. So that's pretty neat, 30 years later, still looking back at that. By the way, it wasn't just a twisted ankle. It was a 3rd-degree lateral sprain and tendon damage. So she said after the first one, she heard a pop. After the second one, she heard a louder pop. And that's what did it there. So, again, if she had not been so positive and just driven, she would not have won a gold medal for herself. She wouldn't have won for her teammates, and she wouldn't have made history either. The first ever women's gymnastics squads to win gold. They have won since, but they were the first. And little girl, like I said, 18 years old, and it was pretty easy for her manager to pick her up and carry her. She weighed 85 pounds, they said back then. These are not very large girls at all. But that's what can happen whenever we seek out the positive, and set our hearts that we want to focus on the positive, focus on our abilities, and so forth. And so Grumbling says that God isn't enough. She wasn't willing to grumble. She said she had the thoughts, though. She said, I don't know if I can even do this. But then she just thought her focus changed to her responsibilities, and then the rest is history. Again, we all grumble, we all complain from time to time, no matter how much we want. And not all of it is bad, but I think practically we know that we hear a lot more of grumbling just to vent and not really to seek out some kind of a positive resolution to it. In my experience, a lot of people who are what I would say chronic complainers, it's easy for us to justify, there's a problem, somebody's got to do something about this. You hear people say, somebody's got to do something about it. Well, we're constantly saying somebody's got to do something about it, and we're not trying to do something about it. That could be a opportunity for some self-reflection, put it that way. So maybe you are just more disposed to negative personality. It's what you are. Maybe it speaks more to you today. Maybe you're more positive and you think, it's not so much as big of a deal for me, but we're still all guilty of it. And we can add it to the list of subtle sins. Ones that I think of are lying. Who hasn't told a lie? Still sin. Looking at someone lustfully, hating someone, stealing something, even if it's tiny. You can add grumbling and complaining to that list too. They are sins. God doesn't approve, but God's also willing to forgive too. But we have to recognize that it's a problem first, recognize that it is a sin, and then go from there as far as repenting. Because God is a fountain of goodness. He offers freely for all of us to drink from His goodness and His righteousness. It's my prayer that we are all drinking from that same fountain that God offers more than we could ever need. And just knowing that alone doesn't give us any reason to grumble or complain about that. So let's bow our heads now and conclude with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this time together. We thank you for the book of Exodus. There's a lot of frustrating things that we read in there. We might read it and we think, how can these people be so blind and just, whining and complaining and moaning all the time after what they had experienced? But then we have to read it while looking in the mirror too. We have to wonder, is there a way that we've been like that before? Are there things that we can do to avoid acting like that in the future? Because the Bible is living, it's breathing, it speaks to us where we are. And maybe a year ago, this passage wouldn't mean much to us. Maybe today it means more. But God, we are just thankful for all the goodness and the blessings that you give to us. And we pray that your Holy Spirit would guide us whenever we have some negative thoughts creeping in there about things that, should be done, or things that we just aren't very happy with in life. And just allow us to focus on the good things and the blessing, because there's always something positive that we can focus on. So we thank you and praise you in Jesus' holy name. Amen.